The ideas expressed in the following presentations are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of ACI or its committees. ACI web sessions are recorded at ACI conventions or other concrete industry events and will be made available for viewing free of charge for 1 week. Thereafter, they will be archived on the ACI website or added to ACI's online CEU program, depending on their content.
Okay, well, I've really enjoyed attending these because I've learned a lot. I learned a lot in preparing my presentation about John Early. The angle that I wanted to introduce was the fact that we're doing a lot of these things today, not only in restoration applications that are for Early's work, but just in what we would consider now to be commonplace architectural precast. He was obviously, John Early was a real inspiring individual who was doing cutting-edge work at the time. His methods have actually survived the centuries, and it's just a fascinating study, and I encourage everyone to continue to investigate what he has done. We talked about one of the things that John Early did is he used plaster molds and plaster forms. He liked the term molds, of course. It's very similar because he was coming from that artistic background, and we would most likely call these forms. But this happened to be a cast-in-place application that utilized over 4,000 individual plaster molds to make these amazing artistic effects. The Baha'i Temple is another application where they use plaster molds. There's in the dome itself, just the dome, there's over 387 individual plaster molds that had to be developed and used to make these exquisite shapes. Some of those panels are over 6,000 pounds in weight, and 100 years ago, lifting and moving a 6,000 pound panel after stripping it with 24 hours of cure time or less had to be just an amazing feat of engineering and material design. John Early pushed the envelope for design in his time. We're doing that still. This is a fairly typical application for architectural precast. Tall structures, beautiful finishes. And we're doing things now that I think that John Early would appeal to him and challenge his imagination as well. This is an example. This is the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. This is cast stone, so it's got that sandstone finish on it. These are panels that are 4 to 6 inches thick that have captured this shape. So it's just a really neat project that I encourage you to check out. One of the things that John Early knew is that architectural precast offered advantages over cast in place because he had a superior labor force. They had a very controlled application. They could use their cutting-edge techniques that they had developed and trained with those individuals, and of course they would use high-performance materials. Some of Early's methods, like we talked about already, we're still using plaster forms and plaster molds. It's a multi-step process. The plaster is cast and tooled. It actually is made into the positive model of what the concrete will eventually look at. You can see we're building up a couple edges here. They've used foam and wood in this case, and they build that up with plaster, and then they screed it off. And here's the screed, and they run that screed over these to come up with a very smooth shaped form. That very smooth shaped form will be tooled and added with more plaster and cleaned up. Here's a bigger piece. You can see how that screed is run along to create this positive image of what the concrete panel will eventually be. This is basically an example of what it will be. So this will be this is the piece that will be made to be a concrete mold, and then a new piece will be cast on top. So that plaster is the positive. That's the positive. Then you cast a concrete on top of your mold that you made out of your plaster. The plaster is finished off with lacquer to make sure that it's hard and dense and smooth. And you're going to tool it and add whatever features you want in it. You're going to have whatever kind of texture you want in it. You put that all in the positive. You cast your concrete mold. Then your concrete is then further finished and cleaned up and made pristine. And then that mold is used to pour successive panels. And these things are done on a regular basis. Right down the road here, there's people working, well, actually, there's recently retired people working at Arbor and Carosi who work for John Early Studios and had worked individually for John Early. So, these techniques have been passed down and are still being used. Of course, we've moved on to much more elaborate materials. Some of the high-tech things we can do with concrete forming is we can use elastomeric molds. I'm sure that John Early would have just drooled over the idea that you could take a mold and peel it off of your concrete piece. Of course, we're still using traditional methods. These are wooden molds, but we've moved into all kinds of materials, hard plastics, foams, etc. So these are some of the comparisons. This is more of a contrast to what John Early did. I went through some of just the fascinating stuff that I did in my research was to capture some of these amazing quotes. And this is a slight variation on different quotes I've heard. We all seem to have our favorite John Early quote. John Early said, "It's my desire to have you realize that concrete is able to meet the most exacting requirements of texture and is subject to beautiful coloring, dependent for its range only on our knowledge of aggregates." His knowledge of aggregates was terrific. We talked about it, Bob, you talked about it a little bit earlier. He changed the grading on his aggregates just a tad to coarsen up his sand, and he got that strength he was looking for. He was able to extract that water that he didn't want in his mix. And he was able to use that to ensure that when he stripped his forms in 24 hours, which they did at the Baha'i Temple, they would be able to get after it with those wire brushes. He, like we talked about, would not use pigments. All his color was typically developed, and especially in the early years, by the use of the aggregate itself. So, and I think that he in one of the publications, he was saying, "Gee whiz, I wish I could do something else," but our experience is that all these other methods don't work as well. We don't end up with a pristine concrete at the end that is up to our standards. And you look at one of the things that he talks about is here you can't use chemical treatments, sandblasting, etc. And then I love this quote because I'm a cement guy. It's very wise to get after it right away, because the difference in hardness of the surface between the morning and afternoon is a thing you would have to experience to believe, right? So if you don't get after that when the concrete's still green, trying to get that paste off later would have been a real challenge. I just added this. We've got a bunch of old publications in my office. I just added, this is what John Early was dealing with. It's so easy to look at a hydraulic crane that can lift these things into place. He was dealing with small batches and old technology, and he did not have the advantage of the high-tech and metal oxide colors that we do now, that have that color fast finish and that will produce very nice finishes. We do use a lot of pigments now. We'll use chemical retarders on our forms to get that face instead of people with wire brushes typically. We can use sandblasting. We can use acid etching. And all of those different things will give you a different look. one of the things that it really caught my eye is that he really didn't like the idea of fracturing the face of the surface of the aggregate, because remember, that was where he got his color. And so sandblasting did exist back then, but he's trying to get the color out of the stone. And so if you do sandblast finishes, you do abrade those surfaces. You really do knock down that bright color that nature has put into place. You fracture the face of that sand and stone. This is an example. This is right out of the Architectural Precast Concrete Association's website. These are examples. This is chemically retarded, which is very similar, I think, to what John Early would have wanted and expected and accepted, because you've just removed the paste. You've kept that brightness of that beautiful stone. This is all the same mix, same panel, just next to each other, right? So here's a heavy blast. You can see how that stone's been abraded. And then this is a medium blast, which you're still seeing a lot of the paste. Contemporary architectural precasters have just a wealth of opportunity for you. Do you want a sandblast finish? Do you want an acid etch finish? Do you want a chemically retarded finish? This is the kind of thing that I think John Early would have a wall like this himself, and I think that he would also really highlight still the aggregate. The use of colored aggregate is still absolutely key in our business. But costs being the way they are, the ability for one guy with a sandblast hose to finish those panels is really attractive. Here's an example. This is actually polished granite, and this is a retarded finish, just once again to illustrate what those chemical retarders on forms can do now. This is an example. This person, as you can tell, he's got his mask up. He's doing the after wash. He's acid etched or acid washed this panel, and then he comes back with clean water. And you get a very fine, kind of a sandstone feel look to it. It's beautiful. It's done a lot with cast stone these days. These kind of applications are where you see a lot of that in contemporary finishes. And once again, John Early, I think, would recognize this. He might object to some of the workmanship, but he would certainly see it. I see one, like looking down here, I would not expect a John Early to have that kink. So what John Early knew is that design and color is possible. He said that what is now under the modern mosaic beauty of concrete, with a character all its own and an adaptability greater than any other medium. In other words, concrete's the way to go. By carefully grading aggregates, highly desirable quantities can be given to the concrete, such as increased strength and durability. Not only was he an artist, but he recognized the structural importance of making great concrete. I alluded to this earlier, how the gradations were so important to him. He said that this proves that less water makes better concrete. We know that now, and we accept that as scripture. Where at the time there was still a fairly robust argument over that, and really how much water did you have to take out. He estimated that he got his water down around 0.35 water-cement ratio, and this is based on gallons, of course. But when they would put their concrete up, before they blotted it to remove that excess water through what he called capillary system, he estimated that it would get down to about a 0.35. So what John Early knew was beautiful concrete, and I think we can all agree that we're all richer for that experience and for that knowledge. Thank you.